Iowa State rolls past Lipscomb in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but now faces a challenger in Ole Miss. What will Ole Miss do to try to get the upset, and how will Iowa State respond? This is a Locked On Cyclones, Locked On Ole Miss crossover.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going into Thunderdome. Nick Moravets from Locked On Cyclones joining us, and we're going to be talking about a basketball game between two teams that don't know much about each other, and they hardly ever play. I think Ole Miss played Iowa State about 6 or 7 years ago in the SEC Big 12 game. Iowa State won that game. Ole Miss wasn't particularly good, but that holds no relevance of what's going on in this game. It's this kind of a fun matchup because, listen, Nick, Tim Doyle from CBS Sports HQ, which is kind of, for anybody that doesn't know, that's kind of like the AA of national media. He's trying to make it to the show. So he's trying to use Ole Miss, and he claimed that they are the frauds of the tournament and that San Diego State, North Carolina would beat them and take them out. And now that Ole Miss has beaten North Carolina, he said, well, that doesn't count because North Carolina didn't even deserve to be in the tournament to begin with. And now Ole Miss is a fraud if they don't beat third seed Iowa State. And this is the ridiculousness of being an Ole Miss basketball fan this year.
Well, I'm just glad you guys are getting the fraud claims and not Iowa State. After Keyshawn kind of went down, there was definitely talk, especially with the latter third of the season for Iowa State and all the ups and downs that we've been through. Do they deserve to be a 3 seed? Really, should they be on that? You know, there was conversations obviously early for 2 seed or where on the 3 seed line. And then after Keyshawn goes out, it's like, well, maybe 4 or 5. Is this really a true 3 seed? So I am totally happy with you guys having that title.
Yeah, the bad news for Iowa State, and I will say this, Ole Miss is obviously coached by Chris Beard. And Chris Beard is essentially like Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. So any little bit of motivation he can use to get at his team, he is a master of doing it. If you look at the Ole Miss North Carolina game on Friday, Ole Miss came out with their hair on fire. That was a pissed off Ole Miss team on the court. And North Carolina was just overwhelmed in the beginning. And honestly, that run at the beginning is the reason Ole Miss ended up winning the game. He's going to use this motivation as much as he can, especially going against an Iowa State team that he's probably fairly familiar with during his time as Texas Tech and Texas.
Well, yeah, the Big 12 is a very tough basketball conference. So, coming from that is big. But, in that same vein, I think that TJ Otzelberger is also extremely good at firing up his guys. So this could be a great coaching matchup. The one I will say, this is not a great look, but the one thing I am slightly concerned about is TJ in late game. We've seen kind of some instances this season of not great late game execution. So that's where I wonder if this does come down to the wire. Maybe Ole Miss can get the edge, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be too close, and we'll obviously get into that more. But I do think that TJ, as far as actual coaching, he put out like an 8-minute promo earlier this season, and I was ready to run through a wall, and I'm not even on the team. So
yeah, it's going to be an awesome game because, Iowa State, they have a decent, really good history recently with college basketball. Ole Miss, this is the 10th time in their program's history they've gone to the NCAA tournament. Ole Miss is a football school. There's no joke about that. That's what they care about. I got a video last week that got over 7,000 views on YouTube and had to put out a Mr. Rogers meme of "I'm proud of you," basically. Thank you for watching that. This is how excited Ole Miss fans are to make this run, and how big of a game that to the fan base this Iowa State game is, because the most successful season in their history was a Sweet 16 run in 2001. And Ole Miss, obviously, if they get past Iowa State, if they can D up, do all of that, they get to go to the Sweet 16 and probably play Michigan State. I don't know, maybe New Mexico. I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah. But it's interesting. The point of this is Ole Miss is happy at this point. This is a widely successful season, no matter how the game goes tomorrow. But Ole Miss, if they win this game, the season goes from great to an elite Ole Miss basketball season.
I think you got to hope that they aren't content with where they're at now. I do have to, if that's the case, because Iowa State obviously projected to be a Final Four team basically the whole first half of the year for sure. And then the second half, it's like, oh, do the injuries matter enough? So they were still kind of in that conversation. There's a lot of talk around Iowa State just in general on, social really. What is considered a successful season for them? I'm in the same boat as you. Like, we had an unbelievable regular season, and where the tournament kind of falls is what it is. But there is a lot of still expectation on a Final Four, or at least a Sweet 16 appearance. Obviously, TJ Otzelberger has turned this program around. Like, I think yesterday with the win, now he has more wins in the NCAA tournament than any other coach in Iowa State history, men's basketball coach, excuse me. So obviously very successful, but there is still that element of we got to go right now. This is a business trip. Like, you're going to have to bring your best to the floor.
Thanks again for watching this crossover edition of Locked On Cyclones and Locked On Ole Miss. When we come back, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this game and see exactly how it goes. So stick around.
We are all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team plus the gear wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Wherever you're exploring off-road trails, rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights with the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com.
All right, we're back in Thunderdome. We're going to start breaking down this game in earnest. Now, the North Carolina Ole Miss game, Ole Miss had an advantage in that matchup because if it's a guard-dominated team, Ole Miss matches up pretty well against any guard-dominated team in the country. Iowa State's not really a guard-dominated team. They've got some bigs. They can shoot from the outside. They're very versatile. They like to move them around. That means that you're going to have a little bit of a chess match potentially with how Iowa State wants to use their bigs and how Ole Miss wants to kind of take advantage of those bigs. And it could be a situation in the Tennessee game earlier this season. Ole Miss was down by 7 or 8 points at the half against Tennessee. And in the second half, they decided to go, okay, we're going to go small. Jamin Brakefield as the 5. He's 6'7". We're going small. We're going to get the bigs out on the floor, make them try to defend and eliminate their rebounding advantage in just isolation. You saw Malik Dia, you saw Jamin Brakefield taking their bigs to the basket. And once they kind of got hot, they were able to chip away that lead. I'm seeing something potentially similar because Chris Beard is obviously very familiar with what Iowa State does. So I think that Ole Miss may try and take the strength of Iowa State and kind of use that against them in a way that might look a little bit differently.
I'll tell you this much. Early in the season, the mantra I was going with is Iowa State can beat you in any way, shape, or form. Is that still necessarily true? I think with Keyshawn missing, obviously there is, a little bit of a question mark there just because of the drive and kick ability that Keyshawn brought to this team. But in that same kind of idea, Milan Momcilovic is as hot as he's ever been. Nate Heisey is coming out playing great basketball right now. And Tamin Lipsey, of course, not necessarily known for his scoring ability, but also playing very, very good basketball. And so that on top of the elevated big play we've seen in recent weeks from Jefferson and Jackson, I'm not too worried right now. I do think Iowa State can match up with anybody. We'll just have to see kind of how the chips fall because, against a team like BYU that shoots the lights out from 3, that's a team that Iowa State struggled with, obviously losing to them twice. Lipscomb was on everybody's radar as a 3-point shooting team, as someone that could upset Iowa State. I believe the most picked 14/3 upset in the tournament per like the ESPN brackets or whatever. So I'd be curious to see, where can Ole Miss actually find their footing, and then can Iowa State work from that?
Yeah, I think that this game is going to be two teams that want to attack the same way, and I think they're both going to try and want to go defense to offense.
Yes,
and
that is definitely TJ's mantra.
Yeah, and that's Chris Beard. He does the same thing as well, and he wants to turn you over, get the open court, get some easy baskets, drive to the lane. There's a lot of similarity between these two coaches. You're going to see a similar game. Now, the thing that concerns me about this game is the rebounding edge, and Ole Miss is not a good rebounding team. They're for whatever reason they just haven't been. They out-rebounded North Carolina because if Ole Miss out-rebounds you, you're not winning the game, period.
Yeah.
There's nobody that's going to beat Ole Miss if Ole Miss out-rebounds you. But if Ole Miss can just stay within 10 in the rebound battle with Iowa State and make up the ground in the turnover game, take care of the ball, turn Iowa State over, especially having a secondary point guard running things, that is where I think the rubber is going to meet the road with the Ole Miss Rebels.
I think it's a great opportunity for Ole Miss, but I'll take your attention to the BYU game, in which Iowa State was rebounded by I think 24, the one in the regular season, but they still had 29 turnovers, and so that's what kept them in that game. Iowa State's smothering defense, obviously, something we've talked about kind of all year. I think they had 3 straight games where they held their opponent to less than 10 points in the first 10 minutes. Can they come out with that same fire? Maybe. And so if they do get out rebounded by Ole Miss, and you say no one can beat Ole Miss when they get out rebounded, I wonder if Iowa State can make up the ground in the turnover game, as you said, just kind of turn the card the other way, because there was no way Iowa State should have been in that BYU game, but almost 30 turnovers. Obviously, it's gonna help a little bit. So if they can play smothering defense, Iowa State has been kind of spotty on the boards at times. Now against Lipscomb, obviously a much bigger team, not so much of an issue there. But if they do fall short, I think that the turnovers can help them as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting as I'm having this conversation with you, it's like we're talking about the same team.
Yeah, it's like the identical.
It's like two Ole Miss people talking or two Iowa State people talking, and it should be a lot of fun. Now, granted, everybody, North Carolina fans that bought up tickets to Milwaukee, I'm sure. We have this little thing with the SEC tournament that whenever Kentucky gets eliminated, you just kind of stand outside the exit and you try and pick up the books from Kentucky fans because they obviously, they do. I think something similar with the North Carolina fans. So we have no idea what the crowd makeup is going to be. I do know that Milwaukee is closer to Iowa than Mississippi. I mean, even my Mississippi geography can tell me that. But I do know that a good number of Ole Miss fans are going to be traveling up, and I'm curious to see what the crowd makeup is going to look like.
My guess is it's going to be a lot of Cardinal and gold, obviously closer in actual geographical position. Yes, I am also in that same wavelength. I can figure that out. But you got to remember Milan Momcilovic from Wisconsin, TJ Otzelberger from Wisconsin. Remember a guy named Tyrese Halliburton from Wisconsin, made a big promo for Wisconsin players to go to Iowa State after high school. So there is like kind of a pipeline forming. And I think that there's like a growing Iowa State fan base up there on top of the rabid Iowa State fans that travel so well, known for Hilton South at the Big 12 tournament. I think that this is going to be a dominated crowd by Iowa State. But I mean, to be completely fair, those tickets on the outside by North Carolina, like that could play a role. That really could.
Yeah, and it's funny because, the 2 seed is down in Cleveland, with Michigan State, and you look at Kentucky, they're playing a little bit later, and that same situation with the Milwaukee. I imagine it was the Kentucky fans that are up there basically getting the tickets off of the North Carolina fans whenever they left.
Yeah,
I think they're doing a reverse SEC tournament.
Hey, Iowa State had their tickets bought. Everything was booked up weeks in advance. So this is a very passionate fan base. I wonder if we hear some Cyclone powers on the broadcast.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. It's one of those situations whenever you play games like this. I mean, just so everybody knows that's watching this video, we like to dabble in the sensationalistic. We like to manufacture rivalry. It's hard for me to manufacture a rivalry with Iowa State. I mean, it's same thing. It's probably the same thing. It's like, I've got nothing against you, man.
Yeah. Well, I think this is just a great matchup in this tournament. Like, I think this is just going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously the winner will face either New Mexico or Michigan State. We're not quite sure. I think this is a great section of the bracket as a whole. It's going to bring a lot of excitement to whoever moves on. But at this point in time, this is a great matchup for both of these teams. I think it's going to be a ton of fun, like just pure entertainment value. This is a high-level game.
Yeah, and if Ole Miss were able to pull this off and make it to the Sweet 16, which is in Atlanta, you would potentially have Auburn and Texas A&M and Ole Miss, and then you would have Michigan State. They're the 2 seed that would be so outnumbered. Can you imagine all those SEC fans that are going to go into Mercedes-Benz in a situation like that? Good God.
That's a big home field advantage, or home court, I suppose. And that's a real thing in these tournaments. That's for sure. And that's why I do feel so good about this matchup as far as from the crowd. Obviously, the guys got to get done on the court. Like, doesn't matter how loud you're cheering, you got to put the ball through the hoop. And so if Ole Miss wins, maybe I'll root for them when they move on. But as it stands right now, we got one game in front of us, 40 minutes of hard-nosed basketball, Iowa State in Milwaukee. I like it.
And also, like I said, it's hard to generate ill will towards Iowa State.
No,
It's the same way and all that. But Michigan State beat Ole Miss. That happened in the NCAA tournament a few years back. Michigan State and Mateen Cleaves won that game way back. So I can generate a little bit of hatred there. And then once you deal with like the A&M and Auburn and all that, they can die in a fire. Yeah.
Then it's easy.
Yeah. That's a piece of cake. Anyway, thanks for tuning into this crossover edition of Locked On Cyclones and Locked On Ole Miss. When we come back, we will talk about some players to watch for and give you our score predictions. So stick around.
Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament like me, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I have been staying up late watching all the tournament action, and 5-Hour Energy has helped me get through the next day. With longer days, I do love getting outside for a hike or a run, and Tropical Burst is my go-to for a quick boost. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one right now? Grab a 5-Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
We are back on this crossover edition of Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Cyclones. You know what, Nick? It's going to be really awesome. I think the player to watch for Ole Miss in this game, other than obviously Sean Badula, who has ice water in his freaking veins, and after the end of the North Carolina game, if he has a big game against Iowa State, he's the Ole Miss player that has a chance to be the story of the tournament going into the Sweet 16 every year. Something like that happens. The player, though, that I think that Ole Miss fans and Iowa State fans need to watch out for is Dre Davis. Dre Davis, whenever he goes off, whenever he scores, when he stays out of foul trouble, he makes Ole Miss go from good to great. The problem for Ole Miss when they lose is too early fouls, a couple of bad shots from three-point range. The confidence gets shaken. He ends up off the floor, and Ole Miss just isn't the same team. I think Dre Davis, even though you have a lot of really good players, Dre Davis is the one that can elevate this team significantly.
I think Iowa State, you said it's funny because these teams are so similar. I kind of think Iowa State's in like the same boat yet again. Curtis Jones, ice in his veins, very much could have a significant impact on this game. And then my attention, if you're not going to go with Curtis Jones, goes to the inside and Joshua Jefferson, kind of the same thing. If he can control this game, Iowa State plays extremely well in those circumstances. But I am going to stick with the hot hand here as of late. I'm going for Iowa State with Milan Momcilovic. Obviously kind of lit it up in the first half against Lipscomb. And he's one of those guys that Iowa State loves to rally around, can be great from the inside, from the outside. He's very, very versatile. Obviously missed a 7-game stretch in the middle of the season. And I think he's starting to heat up from that point, kind of hitting his midseason form in the tournament, which is a very promising situation to find yourself in. But I will say this, outside of those guys that I named, The one that I do think is very important to this game, not necessarily a key player, but a very, very important player, is Tamin Lipsey. As you mentioned, no Keyshawn Gilbert. The point guard position a little bit depleted for Iowa State. Tamin Lipsey, to me, is the guy that can bring the ball up the floor with extreme confidence and poise. Sometimes, especially with Keyshawn and Curtis Jones at times, they will just fly up the floor and cause turnovers when they really don't need to. It seems like they're completely out of control. Never felt that with Tamin Lipsey. I do wonder if that could be something that Iowa State leans into in this game. Obviously, if Ole Miss is going to kind of play a rough defense, a real tough type of defense, I think Tamin Lipsey and his composure bringing the ball up the floor could be actually a big deal in this one.
Yeah, and I think with the bigs being a problem, Ole Miss is probably going to want to speed this game up. Normally, they want to play kind of slow. I think they're going to want to try and speed Iowa State's point guards up. So you might see a little three-quarter court press.
Yep.
Anything to make them work, make the point guards think. Like I said, this has a chance to be a real chess match between TJ and Chris Beard on the court. And we'll see exactly how it goes, man. I'm really excited. I am worried about the rebounding. I am worried about the Iowa State bigs. I'm not necessarily worried about the guards. Like I said, I think Ole Miss can D up just about any guard that is out there. And look what they did to RJ Davis with North Carolina. I mean, they
was hot.
They can put length on you and completely shut you down. But down low is where I think the rubber meets the road with the Iowa State Cyclones as far as being able to take advantage of Ole Miss.
Feels like it's a football match then, right? Beating the trenches, right? That's where you win.
Yeah. And the good news for Ole Miss is they probably have the most unknown and also one of the best big men in the entire tournament, Malik Dia. He's a guy that can play absolute bully ball. He's excellent towards the goal. The problem with him is he can fall in love with the three-point shot, and he doesn't use his 250-pound frame to where he can actually play bully ball. Just kind of gets finesse. He's kind of, I talked with a former player that was on my show. Malik Dia kind of plays like the typical European style NBA player. Much more finesse. Instead of if he played like Charles Barkley, he would be unstoppable. Yeah.
Hey, the March is the time when players get noticed. And maybe someone's going to get in his ear like, dude, if you just make noise on the inside. I mean, hey, I'm just thinking optimistically from that standpoint, but he's going to have a tough matchup with Jefferson and maybe Jackson or Chatfield, depending on, like, obviously foul trouble. Who is on the inside for Iowa State can be a question mark, but Iowa State going to have to kind of play big heavy without Keyshawn. Obviously from a numbers standpoint, we can't be wheeling out like JT Rock, I obviously he's more of a big man, but you know what I mean, guys from deep on the bench for most of this game, we're going to have to play with a majority of big players. And so I wonder maybe we'll force him into the finesse. That's what I'm hoping for based on what I'm hearing.
Yeah. But he can hit it. I think he shot like 37% from three. He can make the shots. Yeah. The problem is when you look at what he can do, if you go back in and look at the Ole Miss North Carolina game in the first 10 minutes, there was a couple of plays where he just completely bullied the inside of North Carolina's big men. And I think that says something. But again, Ole Miss has trouble rebounding the ball. It could be interesting. We'll see exactly how it goes with that. All right, score predictions for the game, Nick. What do you think is going to happen? What can we expect?
I believe the spread right now is 4.5 or so. So I'm going to stick kind of close to that line. And I like a little bit more of a defensive look in this one. I think I'm going to take Iowa State 76, Ole Miss 70. Probably comes down to the wire, separated by a few free throws. Iowa State has shot exceptionally well from the line most of this year, outside of a few games in which obviously you're going to see a slight dip just because it's a long season. But I do think that Iowa State pulls away late and moves on to face either Michigan State or New Mexico.
All right. This is what I think is going to happen in this game. I think Ole Miss is going to win the game 63-58. It's going to be an enormous rock fight of a game. And I watched some Locked On Cyclone videos from later on in the season coming up to the Big 12 tournament. And there was one in particular that got my attention, and that was shooting woes basically being a potential downfall for the Locked On, for the Cyclones. So I think they're going to have a rough shooting game. It's going to be an actual rock fight. You're going to see two coaches that are remarkably similar in the way they approach things, basically going at it in a chess match. Chris Beard in the tournament. I'm never going to bet against Chris Beard. Give me the Rebels 63-58.
Interesting. Good point to bring up, because if we do see a situation, the one that stands out every time, like BYU, that game I can't get out of my brain. Iowa State literally locked BYU down early, but could not capitalize off of that. So they found themselves in a really tough position. I think at the 10-minute mark, it was like 8-12. Like, it was just a wild, low scoring game. So it's definitely a possibility, but you got to also remember, maybe Curtis Jones goes 8 for 8 from 3 and hits a 90-foot. Like this, you never know with March, especially, and with some of the shooters that Iowa State has.
It should be fun, and I'm going to enjoy this game either way. And Nick, man, thank you very much for doing this. This has been the Locked On crossover between Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Cyclones. If anybody's going to the game, good luck to you. And Nick, man, I'll talk to you later, buddy.
Yeah, I got one question for you before we go.
All right.
You got any superstitions? Anything you're doing before this game to try to push Ole Miss over the edge?
Walk and talks. I do walk and talks. I make YouTube shorts before the games whenever I get really nervous. And before every big Ole Miss event, I watch Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
It is.
That's the good luck movie.
I love it. I'm just wearing Iowa State gear. Like, I'm not that. I haven't developed that level of superstition yet, but I know it's in my future. So I'll look out for the shorts.
All right, man. Take care, buddy. And we will talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds great. Good luck.
All right. Good luck.